Good evening and welcome to our April the 12th, 2021 Board of Education meeting for the Cedar Rapids Community School District. The meeting is now called to order. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that the agenda of Monday, April 12th, 2021 Board of Education meeting be approved as set forth, and that each item is considered ready for discussion and/or action.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
This is a roll call.
Director Borcherding.
Aye.
Director Garlock.
Aye.
Newman. Aye. Director Tominski.
Aye.
Director Merschbrock.
Aye.
Director Riesinger.
Aye.
President Humbles.
Aye. Tonight we have 4 public hearings: McKinley Middle School secure entrance, Jefferson High School ADA locker room, Washington High School pavement improvement, and our fiscal year 2021-2022 certified budget. Board Secretary Day, have we received any written correspondence related to any of the public hearings on the agenda tonight?
We have not received any written correspondence regarding the public hearings for tonight.
Do we have anyone who has pre-registered to address the board this evening regarding any of our published hearings?
We have no one who is pre-registered to speak to any of the 4 public hearings on tonight's agenda.
Seeing none, then our public hearings are now officially closed, and we will move on to the superintendent's reports. Superintendent Bush, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you very much, President Humbles and board members. Excellent to see you this evening, as well as guests. So I do have some things to share for this evening. So I am going to share my screen with you. Oh, hold on here. Oh, it's not doing it. Let's try that again. Here we go. Okay. So first, we're going to start with some staff celebrations of some individuals receiving some recognition. That's always fun to share. Congratulations to Carla Hogan and Beth Davies. Carla works, she leads our payroll department and is a member of the Iowa Association of School Board Business Officials Organization, also known as IASBO. They have given her a Professional Leadership Award. This is a very esteemed award in that organization. And so much gratitude for Carla this year. Just a quick anecdote. When the derecho hit our organizations and our entire community in August, one thing that was really important to all of us was to continue to compensate our employees through such a tremendous time for them. Even though we did not have electricity in this building or internet access, Carla and her team, I said they went total MacGyver in order to make sure our employees were compensated. That is just evidence of Carla on her cell phone and a flashlight in the dark, trying to make connections to the internet system. She goes above and beyond with her team in the payroll department every day to make sure that our employees are getting what they need. But she's also an esteemed colleague across our state for her understanding of school board finance. So congratulations to Carla. Beth Davies, who is a music teacher, band teacher at Franklin Middle School. And Beth also is our leader in for content management of music and curriculum across our district for all of our music teachers. Beth has been recognized by the Iowa School Education Association for Excellence in Education Award. This also is a very esteemed award, and which means every teacher in Iowa who's a member of ISCA has access to this award. And so congratulations to Beth for teaching excellence. And this is just 2 examples of so many more unbelievable employees we have, especially under this year. So just so proud of our employees. Secondly, Director Lebo from the Department of Education visited our district last week. She is on a road show really across the state, highlighting innovative programs and different ways to approach education. Despite the crises we've all been under, the work still moves forward. So these are just examples of the two programs that Director Lebo visited last week: Kenwood Leadership Academy and Iowa Big. And really, I will say hats off to both of these teams, because the students really led the entire experience for Director Lebo. As you know, that's one of our anchor beliefs is student ownership. So thank you to Kenwood Leadership Academy students for hosting that day, as well as the Iowa Big students to share their learning and their experiences within these innovative programs. Director Lebo gives her gratitude as well for her visit that day, and really enjoyed seeing our kids doing their thing in their programs and schools. And then lastly, just for everyone's information, here we go. The construction continues. West Willow, next door there to the former Coolidge, will be former Coolidge location, boy, getting closer and closer to an August opening. So we're very excited the progress at West Willow. I would highlight that on our website as well as on social media. There's a video capturing many more pictures of progress around our West Willow project, as well as Maple Grove at the Jackson site. Dirt is moving, as you can see in this picture, to for our future build. So the construction means progress. So it might be a little messy, but things are definitely coming along, and very excited for those developments. And so that's all I have for you this evening. And again, just deep congratulations and thank you to our staff that's making all this wonderful work happen, and our families who've been supportive and patient as the construction continues. And then of course, our kids doing great things.
Thank you, Superintendent Bush, and also congratulations, Carla and Beth. And it's good to see the construction that is going on in our district. So thank you for that update. Do we have any board reports?
President Humbles, I have a legislative report for the board tonight. We have been focused on the state legislation, things that are happening in Des Moines. Just a note to everyone, the current legislative session is scheduled to come to an end here towards the end of the month of April. So there are still some bills that have an impact on public schools that are still floating around out there. Just to highlight some of the more critical ones to our mission. House File 813 is the bill regarding charter schools. That bill has passed out of Senate committee. It's ready for debate in the Senate. We believe, I sort of thought it might happen today, but as far as I know, I don't think it did. But that charter school bill sort of expands the opportunity for charter schools to come into the state. They can be initiated by what's referred to as a founding group, which has no oversight by local school boards. So that is a concern of ours, that it can be a group or a group representing a business that could establish a charter school in the state without local oversight. So we're watching that one. A second one that we're paying close attention to is House File 802. This also is ready for action on the Senate floor. This is the bill that relates to diversity training. It puts some very restrictive guidelines on what can be included in diversity training, not only for staff, but also what we can address in our classrooms. So we're watching that one. And the last one that we're watching is also in the Senate. And this is the Qualified Instructional Support Bill. This is the $27 million that has been being discussed throughout the session. It's related to COVID mitigation. It should come out to be about $60 per student. It got sort of bogged down as they were trying to figure out how to calculate who was eligible, whether you had to be in-person school, or how the derecho, our absences, our virtual learning due to derecho would be counted. They've got that worked out now. The other important part of that bill is that it will include some funding for preschool. As you recall, preschool took a pretty significant hit in school funding because it's not subject to the budget guarantee. So this bill will help with some of that problem caused by that. So that's what we're watching at the state level. Those are all really important bills for us. As the state session comes to a close, we'll be shifting some of our attention to the federal level. Just a couple of highlights from what's happening education-wise at the federal level. The infrastructure package that the administration is proposing has about $100 billion in it for public schools. So it's a significant amount of money that would be directed to public schools. It's a 41% increase in public school funding over previous budgets. So that's good news for us. There are a number of really important components of that. There's an increase in Title I funding for disadvantaged students. There's again a significant increase in funding for the IDEA, which is the Disabilities in Education Act. The federal government originally promised to fund that at 40%. Currently, they're funding it at 14%. So there would be some catch up there. So that legislation is going to also be critical to us. As we switch from our focus on state to national, I think it would be in our best interest to start doing some advocacy with our federal elected officials to help them understand how important that infrastructure funding will be to our public schools. So that's something for us to think about as we move forward and that legislation becomes clearer to us. But definitely, I think we should be talking to our senators and our congresswoman about supporting that effort. So thank you. That's my report for today.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that we can do as a board, Cindy? Director Garlock, excuse me.
In terms of what's happening at the Capitol, we've made our wishes known as a board regarding charter schools. I think at this point, it's parents, teachers, contacting their individual legislators and helping them understand what this means to public school funding. I think we were effective in stopping the voucher bill. Nothing is ever dead until the final gavel falls, but and that's what it takes. It takes a grassroots effort. So in terms of the federal, I think we need to continue that conversation. This is funding that will be very important to us here in Cedar Rapids. So I think we need to take a strong advocacy approach with our federal representatives.
Thank you so much. Are there any other board reports?
President Humples, I do have a very quick report that I was able to visit Hiawatha Elementary School with ongoing school visits and learned about their slices of excellence, and I am willing to share any more information on that with any board member. They just need to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Borcherding. Anyone else that would like to share? Thank you. Next, we'll move to communications, delegations, and petitions. Board Secretary Day, do we have anyone who is pre-registered to address the board this evening?
Yes, President Humbles and members of the board, we do have individuals who are pre-registered for this evening's communications, delegations, and petitions.
I would like to remind those who have requested to address the board to please state your name and address for the record when called. You will be given up to 5 minutes for your remarks. Board Secretary Day will serve as your timer and inform you when your time is up. Additionally, in order to abide by the open meeting law, I'd like to remind the speakers that there will be no dialogue between the board members and the public during this time, except to clarify the nature of the questions or comments from the individual speaking. Laurel, will you call our first speaker?
Thank you, President Humbles. Our first speaker this evening is Dr. Chris Tyler. He's representing the school foundation and is here to provide a quarterly update. Dr. Tyler, if you would please unmute yourself, I will start your 5 minutes of time.
Thank you, board, for having me this evening, and happy spring. My name is Chris Tyler. I'm the board chair for the foundation. Quarterly update I have for you this evening. To start with, all of our traditional spring programs are now open, which includes the professional development grants, school project grants, staff recognition support, the summer literacy program, and the Kids on Course University, and the senior scholarship program, which will be presented at the senior recognition nights. All of this info should be readily available to all the district teachers. We are also proud to say that the senior walk will be happening in all 21 elementary schools on various dates this May. We're also happy to see that the Kids in the Community Field Trip Program applications are increasing now that vaccinations are widespread and the winter weather is gone and the weather is getting warmer. Lastly, and proudly, we anticipate closing the fiscal year 2021 on June 30th in a strong financial position, having recently allocated $200,000 to our endowment at the Greater Cedar Rapids Community Foundation. That is all I have for the board this evening. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr.
And thank
Tyler.
you. Laura, would you like to call up the next person, please?
Yep, I just need to reset the clock here. So I'm sorry.
Okay.
Our next speaker this evening is Lawrence Winkowski. Lawrence is here and wants to address the board about personal agendas in the classroom. Mr. Winkowski, if you would please unmute yourself.
Yeah, Lawrence Winkowski, 4234 Morel Road. Well, today I had a very pleasant and unexpected but pleasant conversation and call with our superintendent, and that she set me straight on a couple of misconceptions I had, and it was very pleasant. We talked about different points of view. We didn't necessarily agree with, totally agree, but we tried to understand the other person's and then apply the other person's point of view to our individual point of view. And it was a very productive conversation. Now, the reason I bring this up is, because this is something that we've learned over time, because a period of time, it just doesn't happen. You start school and you know how to do this stuff. It happens because we've had teachers and other people, and from personal experience, that gave us the ability that we've learned how to listen and speak our different points of view and try to understand the other person's point of view. Unfortunately, this doesn't always happen in our classrooms. You should remember, and it still bothers me to a point. You remember the day after Donald Trump was elected president. I remember it distinctly because my daughter, who was in high school at the time, came home telling me that throughout her whole class, her language arts teacher, all she did was cried and complained how the country was doomed. And that, well, we're still here, all here today, so obviously that wasn't true. But this teacher was bringing her personal viewpoint into the classroom, which has no place. And there was a couple other lessons that took place where she was trying to have kids talk about it, but she wasn't facilitating the conversations. She was leading them. She was leading them to her personal liberal agenda. And that personally, I don't care what an individual's agenda is outside of the classroom. But when you're in the classroom, you're there to facilitate the kids so they are future ready. If we do a good job at that, you know, kids ideally viewpoints will change, or people's viewpoints change as we go forward. And we, as we evolve, we may see something that we like or don't like as we change. And there's got to be some sort of policy or something strong way to come down on these teachers who bring their agenda into the classrooms, because especially nowadays with the climate that we have out there in public, you know, these kids are so impressionable just by turning on the television and everything else that's happening around them. They need a place where they can think objectively. And another thing I wish that we could add to, and I'm not sure exactly how it's done, is we talk about all the freedoms we have in our country. And, you know, the freedom of speech and that. You know, we never teach people that with these freedoms come responsibilities. An example is if you yell fire in a crowded auditorium, that is against the law. But some people would think, oh, this is free, that's freedom of speech. So there is a certain level of responsibility. And I think people need to know that. And I think the best place to learn to start teaching some of this is in our elementary schools. And that there is a certain level of responsibility. So anyway, that's all I have to say. I will thank Superintendent Bush for a lovely conversation earlier today, and also for Director Humboldt for a couple conversations I've had with her over the last few weeks. So anyway, you have a great day, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. So sorry.
Thank you. No, you're okay. Go ahead.
All right, our next speaker this evening is Chris Rawls, and he is here to speak with the board about a bargaining process. Ms. Rawls, if you would please unmute yourself.
Good evening. My name is Chris Rawls, and I live at 2027 Red Rock Drive Southwest. I teach U.S. history and behavioral studies to Jefferson students and college U.S. history to Jefferson students who are concurrently enrolled at Jefferson and Kirkwood Community College. For the past 3 years, I've served on the bargaining team for the Cedar Rapids Education Association. I speak to you tonight as someone that is concerned about the collective bargaining process between the district and the Cedar Rapids Education Association. Due to the 2017 revisions of the collective bargaining law by the Iowa legislature, labor and management were restricted to discussing wages only as a mandatory topic of bargaining. We appreciate that the Cedar Rapids Community School District Board has directed the negotiating team to retain a full and complete contract with the exceptions of several illegal topics that have remained unchanged in the handbook. Though this year was only a wage reopener, with mutual agreement, both parties can agree to discuss other issues. Due to the unusual nature of this school year, several issues were identified by CREA members and the bargaining team that should have been addressed during the bargaining sessions. It was disappointing to me that these issues could not have been resolved with a more collaborative process. One issue in particular that is concerning to both CREA members and non-members is the issue of unused personal days. Up to 5 personal days can be accumulated, and then teachers risk losing additional days that are accumulated. With the suspension of school during the 2019-2020 school year, teachers were unable to use those personal days, and many have accumulated days over the limit of 5. One teacher at Jefferson will have accumulated 7.5 days by the end of this year. Of course, this teacher and others in the same situation could use these days, but then they are left with potentially adding to the substitute shortage that we already have in our district. The solution that CREA proposed was to have the district compensate teachers for those days. I found it disappointing that district administrators and legal counsel were unwilling to consider this issue during negotiations. I do realize that conversations are ongoing between Superintendent Bush and CREA President Johnson, and I'm hopeful that something will be worked out. However, I feel an opportunity was lost to solve this problem and others that were concerning to teachers in our district. I feel that the collective bargaining process should be a collaborative process between labor and management. For my entire 19-year career in Cedar Rapids and my 27-year career overall as a public educator, I have been asked that when confronted with a problem, that before I bring that issue to an administrator, I try to be solution-oriented in trying to solve the issue. In this case, the CREA bargaining team attempted to be solution-oriented on the issue I mentioned earlier, as well as other matters. During the negotiations, these initiatives were cast aside by district legal counsel. I was left to wonder at times who we were negotiating with. I think that this board needs to do a better job of directing district administration and legal counsel to find a way that honors the collective bargaining law as currently written, but also recognizes the importance of the collaborative nature of these negotiations. I do appreciate Superintendent Bush's willingness to continue the dialogue with CREA on these and other issues, and remain hopeful that they can be resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Appreciate it very much. All right, our last speaker this evening will be Tanya Johnson, and Tanya is here to address the board with regards to collaboration. Tanya, if you would please unmute yourself and join us.
Thank you for that reminder to unmute myself, Laurel, as I was starting to talk to the muted screen, which is what I plan to do always. Good evening. I am Tanya Johnson, the president of CREA, and I live at 3816 Riverside Drive Northeast. Dear members of the board, many of you know me, but in case you don't, I was born and raised in Cedar Rapids. I went to school in this district. My kids went to school in this district, and I have taught 30 years in this district. Cedar Rapids is my home, and this school district is very important to me. Over the past 10 years, many changes have occurred in the city and in our district. We've had several different superintendents and practically a brand new ELSC administration. We've been losing families, students, and staff. Staff do not feel appreciated for the work they do. Staff members that work hard, long hours are asked to do more. Teachers who are amazing at their craft are asked to change grade levels, take students with behaviors, or have a higher number of students on their roster than their colleagues. This year has been disheartening for educators across the district who worked harder, longer, and far more creatively than they knew they could to be rewarded by the meager annual increase of 1.1% going into next year. The teacher work crew suffered cuts because of an overspent special ed budget. Special ed teachers who were teaching virtually and in person this year were cut or moved to other places. 44 engagement specialists were cut. These are not in the teacher bargaining group, but their expertise has supported students in many buildings, and now those resources will not be there for classroom teachers. I also want to say that the teachers have appreciated Wendy Parker listening to the concerns from teachers about student behaviors in our district, and when she put in these positions, teachers appreciated some action taking place because of those listening sessions. Additional cuts happening in early learning programs as several early learning multi-cat teacher positions were cut. And last of all, our ELSC teacher leaders, induction coaches, instructional coaches, and Propel coaches are losing the $4,000 stipend that they receive to be teacher leaders. These teachers who have stepped up to be leaders and support their colleagues and students will all take pay cuts next year. The refrain of teachers don't do this for the money is very true, but the feeling of being taken advantage this year or being asked one more time to do the same job or do more for less is not okay. The Cedar Rapids Community School District has a healthy and growing unspent balance. Our unspent balance is in the middle of the board's goal of 5 to 15% for the unspent balance. The unspent balance would most certainly permit a significantly greater annual increase than a 1.1% offered. I also believe that this is the time to use that unspent balance and to think out of the box to figure out how to make it work. Our bargaining team was willing to have conversations about doing things differently and figuring out how to compensate the educators who stick with Cedar Rapids and the teachers stick with Cedar Rapids and teachers through these difficult times. We offered to the board the opportunity to give an additional retirement incentive this year using money from the management fund and being able to lose some higher salaries to cut costs down. We offered the idea for stipends or pay for personal days. We were unable to continue bargaining and working towards this to find a solution because negotiations was stopped when a 1.1% was all the board had given authority for. With the pay increases of the last several years, all over 1%, Cedar Rapids, which has always prided itself with some of the best pay in this area, is quickly becoming less competitive with neighboring districts. We will continue to lose teachers to districts who pay better and where the demands and challenges are less significant. We hope that we can continue to collaborate with the district and the school board outside of bargaining, but we do hope that in bargaining in the future, it will be an opportunity for us to continue to work together. We know that working together makes our district stronger, and making our district stronger is what makes Cedar Rapids stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
And that is all of our speakers for this evening.
Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda. Are there any items that a board member would like to pull for a comment, question, or a separate vote?
Go ahead, Director Garlock.
Okay, thank you. President Humbles, I'd like to just pull, it's BA 21-011. It's policy 801 in our policy review. I just want to pull it for comment, if I could. Policy 801. It has to do with energy/utility conservation. And as I compared this updated policy to what we had before, the new policy looks to be much more extensive and covers a lot more than our previous policy did, which I most definitely applaud everyone for. I think most of you know that energy conservation, climate change, carbon footprint, these are all really issues that are near and dear to me. So I'm really happy to see that we have expanded our policy in that respect. With that being said, I would also just like to challenge the board and the administration to maybe think about ways that we could take this a little bit further. I did notice in the actual policy 801 on page 14, the last sentence says the district is committed to making student-driven district-wide sustainability initiatives a priority. I don't know if I'm interpreting that statement correctly, but I, by all means, support student-driven initiatives, but I would also encourage the district to provide leadership and show our students and our community that we can be leaders in this. We're not just expecting our students to initiate those actions. So I just wanted to make that comment. I think this is progress in the right direction, but I think we do have a significant ways to go. I would encourage us to maybe look into collaborating with the city of Cedar Rapids or Lynn County. Both of those entities have dedicated personnel to this topic, and maybe we could learn from them, not only to set an example for our students in our community, but also to save money, to save resources, and do the right thing for the place where we live. So thank you for allowing me those comments.
Oh, thank you.
President
Oh,
Humbles.
yes, Director Merschbrock, I'm sorry.
I'd like to follow up on that as well. And I'd just like to echo what Cindy said. I think she's on point. And just looking at the policy 801 itself, it says that the district assumes a leadership role in environmental awareness and sustainable practices. And so I guess this is actually more of a question for the administration, but looking at the new procedures that we're putting in place and the policy itself, going forward, if the district and the board wanted to, say, put a policy in place to put resources towards solar panels or other renewable infrastructure in our construction projects, would such a policy, would that fit under policy 801, or would we need to do a new policy to kind of enshrine that as part of our plans?
Dr. Merschbrock, that would be something that we could easily add to the proposed procedure 801A, which would correspond with the other energy and utility conservation efforts that we are currently undertaking.
So we could just fit it under 801, and it would just be a procedure, regulation, that the board would approve under that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else that needs to be pulled, or there's additional comments or a separate vote?
President Humbles, I would like to pull BA 21-286 for a separate vote.
Okay, we can do that. So anyone else?
I also wanted to make.
I'm sorry.
A comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Back to the policies and regulations, but regulation 6055 under homeless children and youth. I just wanted to make a comment and ask a question about that real quick under the same agenda item as Cindy had.
Okay.
And so this is about homeless children and youth, and tonight we're appointing a new homeless specialist at the LSC. And so, reviewing this regulation, I think this might be a good time to talk about this, and I mentioned this at our last meeting. Are we doing enough, to help students in this situation and students with any sort of housing insecurity, going forward under this policy? Is there other policies? I guess that's my question to the superintendent. Are there other policies that we could pursue as a board, partnering with the cities and the counties? Because obviously, as a legal obligation, as kind of a fundamental of education, we want to afford those opportunities of an equal education to every student, regardless of their situation. But my perspective is we should have a goal, and this isn't something we can achieve by ourselves, of there should be no homeless or housing insecure children in Cedar Rapids or anywhere really, but we've got to be focused where we are. And so are there other policies, in your opinion, Superintendent, that we could be pursuing on that? Is that something we need to study farther?
So I think you're getting to the heart of what we believe for each and every child. So Agree. That's a visionary goal for all of our children and families. Some of the policies that would support that are currently in practice, we have policies around community partnerships, for example, and how we partner with nonprofits and others. I think that it might be, honestly, I think we've got probably a lot of policies in place that would support the development of the future vision there. We've learned a lot through the community school work with Hoover Elementary, for example. And so there might be, in this moment, opportunity for us. Director Garlock was highlighting legislatively the funding that's going to be coming forward to schools to hopefully not just recover learning, but we know we have to meet children's basic human needs. What got pronounced during the pandemic? Food, nutrition, safety,
Right.
For our kids. So with that, our homeless liaison, Director Ryan, is also on tonight and could certainly speak to some of the efforts in this very zone. That one person, what that person, that role does is connect community resources together. So I think those connections of community partnerships, we need to hyperbolize that. We need to accentuate that as a district. So it might be, Director Merschbrock, a visionary work that we do in maybe a board work sessions, especially as we look at reviewing our strategic plan for next year. But how do we make sure? I think we have the structures in place. We just need to get the community members around the table who so want to help with this work as well. So I'm thinking about the United Way. I'm thinking about our other community partners who are in this work together, ways that we might be able to cast that vision together. And I'd also gladly review some of those policies and that language for follow-up with you, Director Merschbrock, and the BOE team.
Are there any other comments? What we're going to do is we're going to pull the BA 21-286 for a separate vote. That's the IASB membership renewal. So the first vote, we will approve the consent agenda without the one I just mentioned. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Do we have any further discussion at all? This is a roll call vote.
Director Reesinger,
Yes.
Director Merschbrock,
Aye.
Director Tominski,
Aye.
Director Newman,
Aye.
Director Garlock,
Aye.
Director Borcherding,
Aye.
President Humbles.
Aye. The next vote will be for the renewal of the IASB membership. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. And abstain.
Abstain.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to our administration. Next is the approval of the fiscal 2021-22 certified budget. Are there any questions regarding the proposed budget? Seeing none, all in favor of approval, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Next is the resolution for the fiscal year 2022 state budget guarantee. David, do you have any brief comments?
Yeah, thank you, President Humbles. Just very quickly, this budget guarantee is due to the fact that our loss of 614 students and the state only given 4%. The combination of those two put us in the budget guarantee, and the budget guarantee gives us at least a 1% increase in our regular program cost per pupil amount that we get when the regular program costs, what you get from multiplying the per pupil allocation the state gives times our enrollment, certified enrollment, that gives our regular program costs. So this budget guarantee gives us at least a 1%, and that allows us to levy the additional of those dollars, 2.6 million roughly, levy those dollars to generate at least a 1% increase.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the board, from board members? Do we have a motion for the resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Do we have any further discussion? This is a roll call vote.
Director Merschbach? Did you say something? I'm sorry.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. Director Tominski?
Aye.
Director Riesinger?
Aye.
Director Newman?
Aye.
Director Garlock?
Aye.
Director Borcherding?
Aye.
President Humbles?
Aye. The next item is the exchange of the real estate agreement with the city of Cedar Rapids. Do we have a motion to approve the proposed agreement?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? This is a roll call vote.
Director Garlock?
Aye.
Director Tominski?
Aye.
Director Riesinger?
Aye.
Director Borcherding?
Aye.
Director Newman?
Aye.
Director Merschbach?
Aye.
President Humbles?
Aye. I'll turn our next agenda item over to Superintendent Bush for an update on the pandemic and the district's return to learn plans.
Thank you, President Humbles. And in the past several board meetings, we've kind of opened this up to discussion or even highlighted some things as we continue to make progress in moving forward. I am going to share a quick slide deck tonight just to give some current state and where we are as we move forward in planning for next year, and would absolutely open it up for board questions and feedback. If you remember when we put the standing item on our agenda back in the fall, it was really a matter of discussing those quick shifts we had to make for continuous learning, especially in regards to pandemic county averages when we had to shift to remote instruction in the fall. And we wanted to make sure we were opening up this continued dialogue. So here we are in April. And now it's not just about, well, what's the current county average? It's what are we doing for our learning as we move forward, even into planning for next year. So I'm just going to share a few things and then would gladly take feedback and questions from the board. So here we are, again, continued progress in our current year. The picture on the left side of the screen is just some of our staff being celebrated this is the vaccination team. And so staff vaccinations have certainly given us an opportunity to talk about what's next. And so by April 16th, that's this week, that will be 2 weeks post the last round of second vaccinations, which you have to wait that 2-week time period to be considered fully vaccinated. So for those who chose or could be vaccinated, they are, that's the date. So that it kind of allows us to start thinking about what are our next steps as we're securing the safety of staff. Again, maybe some questions from family members about what's the access for students. We will not at this point in time be providing vaccinations to children. However, that will still be ongoing discussions with public health and how teenagers might get access through their own health providers or their parents advocating for them. So we don't necessarily have any further communications as a school district about that access for kids, but certainly having our staff vaccinated, just thanks to Iowa Department of Public Health, Lynn County Public Health, and our very own health providers in the district for providing those vaccinations. So the current state is really planning for what does this mean for opening our buildings more to perhaps visitors, including our parents. Registration processes get very heavy in the summer. How can we bring back to some of that local control for access to families in their local neighborhood schools? We have to continue our safety measures and what that might look like with our further planning moving forward. So with some of these notes of progress comes, just think about where we were a year ago and where we are now this spring. We are able to offer graduation in person, which we were not able to do a year ago. And so thanks to the high school team for collaborating around this, and our city entities, as well as our partners downtown with the Powerhouse, Alliant Powerhouse, and the DoubleTree. So at this point in time, there should be four people. There's allowed for 4 people for each in-person graduate. We will have four in-person graduations, which would include Kennedy, Jefferson, Washington, and Metro. All the comprehensive high schools will be at Alliant Powerhouse. The DoubleTree will be accommodating our Metro graduation. 4 guests will be allowed per graduate. And there will be pods, and that will be organized, and the process will be implemented with the help of the Alliant Powerhouse and DoubleTree staff. Safety measures from the Powerhouse as well as DoubleTree will be implemented with their guidelines. It's their spaces, and we will assist in the communications that will go out from each of our high schools to our families and guests. So it is limited. We are not able to accommodate to the degree in which we were 2 years ago, but again, a celebration of moving forward for this tremendous rite of passage, which is the stamp on our vision, right? Future readiness. Last day of school, just a reminder, this is now June 4th. Communications went out to families. That was due to a couple of weather days. We had to make up some time, and that adjusted calendar has been pushed out to our families. But this too has been an adjustment due to some weather related activities or weather delays that we had throughout the year. Just as a reminder though, we did have some instructional time that was forgiven by the state because of the derecho, and we also added on some instruction to the days of instruction throughout the school year. So now, next year's planning. 2021-22 school year will offer 2 options to families. Full in-person learning, which we assume that's what the box that most people are going to check, or fully online learning. And there is one option for fully online learning for next year. So the first piece, the in-person learning for 21-22, we do have continued progress. As you can see on the screen, the question is, what safety measures will we have to put in place? At this point in time, the communications that we've gotten from Lynn County Public Health and the CDC is that masking is still one of those #1 mitigators. So at this point in time, we believe that will continue to be expected for in-person. Social distancing for children has gone from 6 feet apart as best as we can, recommended, to 3 feet apart, shows that that is a good mitigation effort to the degree in which we can implement that. But the #1 mitigating factor are masks and wearing masks, and also hand sanitizing, prevention of touching faces, and also hand washing. So those factors will still be in consideration. So the safety measures that the board supported in regards to PPE equipment throughout all of our spaces and provided to individuals has been greatly appreciated, and that work will continue with safety measures of in-person learning. And then as remote instruction continues, we will have only one option and that is the Cedar Rapids Virtual Academy for next year. That has been only a 6-12 option this year. We've learned so much for remote instruction. And so Cedar Rapids Virtual Academy, better known as CRVA, will now be a K-12 option for all families next year. Those are our employees, our teachers delivering that instruction on the screen, as well as using some other supplemental materials that we've been able to push through this year to support our kids. Designs are still underway of what that vision looks like. We will continue to have communication. Be on the lookout this week for more communication around CRVA. And we know that as we move forward, this is now our 32nd school. We have 31 schools. This is now school number 32, the Virtual Academy. We do have a dedicated principal for next year. You see Mr. Cox's picture on the screen here. He will continue as the principal for Madison Elementary and lead the work for CRVA with the district administration team that has been leading that work throughout this year. So we do appreciate all of those leadership efforts, and we're continuing to progress and learn, and excited to continue to offer remote instruction and this virtual academy to our families. That's it for updates that I have for you in regards to Return to Learn. I will stop sharing my screen at this point in time and certainly welcome questions.
Any comments from the board? I will, can I say one thing though, Superintendent Bush? It's so nice to hear that we're going to have in-person graduations. I think that is great. That's great news to know. And I know that took a lot, so there should be a lot of people that are very happy.
Socially distanced.
Yes,
It'll look
wearing the mask,
but in person. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just like to say thank you to the administrative team that has led us through this very challenging year with steadiness and vision, and always keeping kids at the center of what we were doing. I would also very much like to thank all of our staff. I know how hard teaching is, and I can only imagine the stresses that they have had this year. So thank you from our classroom teachers to all of our paras, our bus drivers, our food folks. I mean, everyone has been amazing at getting this job done. And I just really, they need to know how much we appreciate them.
Superintendent Bush, I would just like to thank you and the administration for so quickly growing the practice to allow us to extend that virtual academy down through the elementary levels as well. I know that was a huge lift, but I think it's another example of our innovative instruction, and it delivers on our strategic plan. So I'm just really impressed with that. I know it could not have been easy, but the opportunity that was an obstacle was looked at as an opportunity for growth, and you made it happen. I'm curious if there's been any indication percentage-wise where students are going to fall between that virtual or in-person option.
So we've done some just light surveying to understand what families wanted way back in the winter when we decided, okay, we have this virtual academy for 6-12. We know we need to continue to assess if we need an elementary option. We did have, and this was a head count of students at that point in time, not necessarily families, about 150 said yes, 150 students wanting yes. And then I think that grew even more to closer to 200 when assessed again. We will be this week, this is part of the next level of staffing, agree with Director Garlock, like huge shout out. The way that this has happened is because of an incredible staff. And all of I can't agree more with Tanya Johnson's comments tonight of just how much work all staff has had to do this year to make things happen. And so with that, our teachers who are closest to, this remote instruction world and doing the remote instruction have done some assessments too of families who might want this as an option, and even staff members who might want to continue to teach remotely. So Deputy Superintendent Quaker, any other comments in regards to numbers and for enrollment for next year? I know we're going to be surveying coming up.
Yep, just upcoming survey. We're hoping here at the end of this week to try to find out some details, pushing out some of those details that the large group visioning team put together. And then we have had so many staff give feedback on what those details are going to look like and helping operationalize it at the different levels. So by the next board meeting, we should have some pretty definite numbers and are really excited about, again, the opportunities and the innovation for our students for the future, based on lots of people collaborating together to really come up with what we feel like is what's best for kids.
The behind the scenes, Deputy Superintendent Quaker and the Office of Learning and Leadership did bring leaders and teachers together to vision cast the virtual academy as we move forward. So that was been done in recent weeks. So we'll have some more work to share with you as the work unfolds, but very exciting visionary work. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Director Borcherding. This is delivering on our promise of vision that we had a long time ago. It just got accelerated for obvious reasons. And so it just incredible things happening from our staff.
Absolutely. It is incredible. It's exciting. I, again, cannot applaud enough. Out of curiosity, is there a separate training if a teacher then would be a virtual teacher, or would you pull from existing staff, or how does that work?
So I think that's another great question. So we've talked about how this year staff, of course, had some initial training, and all of our high school teachers have had to do this remote instruction. But also now that we're taking all the things that we've learned, is there an opportunity to provide some targeted instruction once our teachers, so teachers will have the opportunity to apply for these open positions that are available for CRVA. And then we've talked about some intentional training this summer that could be provided to those teachers just to make sure we're really on the same page and they've all had an opportunity to dig into what the curriculum looks like. Because feedback from them is we have all these tools, we have these assessments, but teaching virtually, of course, as all of you know too, looks a little bit different. So there's been a lot of heavy lifts, and our teachers have given us some great feedback on how we could make that a smoother transition for next year from what we've learned this year.
Do you think there's an opportunity to develop a framework there that can be shared so we can have shared practice with other districts? And I ask that because with our Return to Learn, that the framework there was so well respected and easy to implement when we kind of went into this upside down situation and we're figuring out how to move forward. I know other districts kind of use that framework. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to share the work there.
I think that's absolutely the case. And I think as people learn about what, again, all of our staff have created for this upcoming year, they're going to want to have access to that framework. And we're hoping that, we're going to be pulling in some other students from other areas as well that want to take an opportunity to have CRCSD teachers intentionally teaching that curriculum and that continuum of services for them. So absolutely.
Do we have any other comments from board members?
If I may, President Humbles. So I certainly echo what everybody else is saying, celebrating the expansion of this, just watching this program grow over such a short period of time is it's amazing. I can't even imagine what it takes to bring that to fruition. At the high school level, I know when we first rolled out and introduced the virtual academy, like the courses that were available, it was like a number of courses that you could graduate, but certainly not all courses are available. I assume we're still not offering all courses, expansion maybe from what we first offered. Can anybody speak to that?
So we still will have a lot of courses offered by Cedar Rapids teachers, but at the high school level, we do have Ingenuity. So that's more of that self-paced instructional supplemental piece that we'll add as well for things that we maybe cannot offer with that Cedar Rapids teacher structure. So yes, at that level, there'll be additional supplemental offerings from Ingenuity that we'll have in place.
We are seeking like other avenues and opportunities. So there are, for example, AP online courses and options that we want to make sure that we're expanding that programming. I think what's going to be the differentiator for students. So if you want me to talk to you about how Cedar Rapids is different, this is the difference I think that our vision is. It's community and virtual academy. So that the virtual piece is this option and opportunity as we continue to manage the pandemic. For safety reasons, families certainly want that option. But also some families have found that this really works for their child or really works for their family. And so we want to make sure that we're offering that community engagement. I'll say at the K-1-2 level, we know that we want to make sure that we're encouraging play-based learning, other ways for children to explore our community, the African American Museum, the National Czech Museum. What does it mean to be in a think tank and an innovative think tank down at Geometric and down at Nubo? And how can we continue that community component from a bigger lens? So when we think virtual, that's maybe a primary driver, but I think there's going to be some in-person invitations, especially as we continue to develop this, as we get better at managing the pandemic and are able to offer in-person opportunities too. That will be a differentiator. And even if kids are across the state and are enrolled in our virtual academy, we want those relationships that they can encourage within their own communities as well. So that's the vision, the big vision.
Great, thanks for sharing that.
Thank you for everything, the work that the district has done, bringing us all together, getting us through the pandemic, the derecho, and we are standing strong as a district. And it took the village to get us through all of this. So I thank each and every one that was involved, and we're only getting stronger. That's where we're going right now. So thank you, everyone. Next, learning and leadership. Deputy Superintendent Quaker and Director Kent Ryan will now present on the equity update.
All right, thank you so much, President Humbles and Board of Directors. Can everybody see the screen all right? Thank you. So really excited to be here tonight and also give you this equity update on the work that's currently happening in Cedar Rapids. Thanks. So the purpose today that we're going to cover is to share how the district, we are taking these intentional steps to ensure that we are having actions to close those disproportionate gaps for our students. So as we go through this whole presentation, this was the whole purpose of what we're doing and why we're doing this equity work. Our equity goal by June of 2022, CRCSD will reduce gaps in the reading and math across all student demographic groups. So this is ELL, IEP, race, free and reduced by that 20% ratio. So currently, as you know as well, we were working on closing gaps. So this year has created a little bit increase. We saw that through the update we gave you through the winter assessments that the gaps have increased slightly. So really are trying to be intentional about how do we get some actions going quickly that can have some positive student results across our system.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kent Ryan. I'm the director, elementary director of culture, climate transformation. I almost gave myself a promotion there. And I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to talk about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And that is making sure that all of our students are learning at very high levels. You know, despite our best efforts, we still have learning gaps. We have worked on this issue for years, and despite that good work, we have gaps that still exist and continued into this year. My job today is to talk to you a little bit about what those gaps look like this year. As you look at the slide that's in front of you, when we walk you through the table that's on the far left, you'll see on the left side, you'll see fast math, and below it, fast reading. This first table describes the differences in learning for our Black and African American students compared to our white students. In the fall, the gap between our Black and African American students and our white students was 24 points in fast math and 23 points in fast reading. And you can see that over the course of the first semester and into the winter, those gaps actually increased slightly. If you look in the middle table, you see that the same thing occurred, largely for our students who are part of our ELL programming. Our gaps increased again in math, and the gap stayed the same in reading. And then for our students who have IEPs, the same thing was experienced. Our gaps increased from fall to winter. This was for our elementary students on the FAST assessment. On the next table, we see what's happened this year for our middle school students as measured through iReady. It's the same story. We see a gap at the beginning of the year and a gap that's been enlarged by the time we get to winter on every single assessment for every single subgroup. In some cases, the gaps are significantly large. The same holds true for high school. We do not have fall data, but this is from our MAP assessment. Again, looking at reading and math, but also adding in science for high school. The gaps only get larger in high school. When you look at the gaps, especially for our ELL students, you see gaps of upward of 66 percentage points. We've put in a lot of good work to move these gaps, and the gaps continue to increase. Recently, a group of people in leadership in our district met and started the work of changing the story.
So with that, we started with reviewing and compiling history, data, programs, and actions. And we did that as a team that actually connected to point 2. So we had the opportunity to join an AASA cohort, which is the American Association of School Administrators. So that they were allowed to have 5 members on the team. So 5 of us started that work. So every month there's a webinar where we're connecting with 21 other school districts across the US and have opportunities to engage in learning. And the piece that was really exciting about that is there's some action steps to hold people accountable. So to hold our team accountable to make sure we were making growth and doing some of the work that we were committed to do. So that team started out as 5, but we've expanded that to now we have a group that's just, again, the action planning group that there is 9 of us on that team. So organizing current programs, resources, and professional development. There's been so many great things that have been done in Cedar Rapids in the past around equity, inclusion, and diversity. But how could we make sure that we're measuring these goals and really putting this on a scorecard in front of us to make sure we're showing those improvements? Then outlining core actions as a launching point and aligning CRCSD strategic plans with this. Also reviewing current monitoring systems to establish that accountability piece that I talked about, and then identifying possible next action steps. So the work of the team, we've landed on some first next steps. And the first one was that leadership piece, creating a district equity team, which we've identified as the work of SIAC. So this year, the work of SIAC has been on family engagement. We've had 2 meetings and we have 1 more left where they're providing some feedback. They've already done a survey just to help as parents, as staff members, kind of just tweak or give us feedback on what's working and what's not. Next year, we're intentionally expanding that group and having an equity team actually out of SIAC. So intentionally inviting various representatives throughout the system and our parents to make sure we have the right group to be doing that district equity work, and then support staff as well. At the beginning of the year or earlier in the year, we gave a survey and our employees of color gave very intentional feedback that they really believe we need an employees of color resource group. So we're following based on what they've asked for. We think that's another good initial first step. The third point is building staff capacity. So in the district, there has been IDI inventories given, intercultural development inventories. Some of our buildings have done these within their certified staff, their teachers and administrators. I know when I came, one of the first things I did was take this intercultural development inventory. And then there's what's called a QA, which is a qualified administrator that meets with you on how well you're scoring where you're at in the continuum, but that hasn't been done for everybody. So in our work as a district planning team, we've decided that this is important that everybody takes this intercultural development inventory and has an opportunity with a QA to be able to debrief on that. And then the next step would be professional learning for all staff and employee groups. And we've identified 4 different professional learning opportunities around growth in this area that we will provide staff with next year. In addition, we're having all administrators, so whether they're head principals or their associate principals and instructional coaches, will be signing up to do a 2-day training with NAWA around the IDI. So we aren't gonna fully make them the licensed QAs because we have 40 already in our district, but we want to provide them the training and build their capacity so they can have the conversations and know what some of those look-fors are, and just to grow all of us in that area of equity.
Nicole, could you say who NAWA is?
So yes, he's from Iowa City.
Minnesota.
Oh, I thought he was from Iowa City. Sorry, I'm talking maybe Ron. So I'll let Kent talk because he's worked with NAWA longer. I just know how to get a hold of him.
Yeah. NAWA has worked with our district for the past several years, leading the IDI work, leading the training around IDI, especially around our QAs. He comes out of Minneapolis and has been doing this work for a very long time, and now runs as part of a company that does this work nationwide.
So sorry to NAWA since he's out of Minnesota, and confusion with Ron out of Iowa City.
Thank you.
So 4th point, focus at building levels on building equity goals into SIPs. So buildings have school improvement plans, and OLL has some very clear goals that then trickle through the entire system that we focus on supporting. So for example, if there's a building that has large gaps in their students of color around math instruction and achievement, that building will intentionally have an equity goal to try to close those gaps. And we'll be holding them accountable. They'll be coming to their building level teams and reporting out to their peers and also to their executive director of the building level, sharing out what their goals are and also where they're moving and what those leading measures are to achieve those goals within those SIPs. And then of course, family engagement, which we've been doing this year and have been intentional about, but we're going to continue that. And that's another piece where you can have some specific equity goals around maybe whatever families you're not connecting with, and make sure that we're closing those gaps and giving everybody that opportunity. And then truly partnering, not just with the relationship piece, but how can families engage and help their students academically to achieve those goals. So we're working on developing that plan as well and making that tighter. And we'll be additionally working with SIAC. We have currently a team of some of the teachers and administrators that Justin Blitz has been working with, and I've been attending those meetings, just trying to come up with, again, what does this look like? How can we continue to grow family engagement? How do we embed time so teachers can actually make this happen? And what does it look like at all the various building levels?
So the next several slides include more details and many of the same details that Nicole just discussed about each one of those 5 actions. I'm going to walk you through each of the 5 tables. The first is about the district equity team and the new use of our SIAC group to address equity across our district. On the left side of the table, you see the outcomes that we'll be using to measure the impact of our work. And then the next 2 columns show where we expect to be, where we hope to be in 3 years, and what we'll be doing in the first 6 months to 1 year. Much of what Nicole talked about in her discussion of those 5 actions are the actions that are going to happen in the first 6 months to a year. So go back one more. Let's go back for a second. So we've landed on, as Nicole said, we've landed on a few actions already that we believe will have an impact on our student outcomes. It's this team, the SIAC committee, that's actually going to be leading the effort in providing oversight of our work. They will study the research, consider our context, and identify additional actions that will help us reduce and close our gaps. The Employees of Color Resource Group is a start on a group of multiple employee resource groups that we expect to establish over the next couple of years. One of the pieces that we read over the course of this year is that oftentimes schools and school districts often get trapped into studying the problem of equity and do little action. We felt it was important to start acting in this area and have identified the need to have an employees color resource group that supports a group of people that oftentimes don't stick with us as long as we would hope. So we hope to have a group put in place to improve retention of that group and provide support for them as they do their work in our district. So we need to get that group together. We need a sponsor. We have somebody in mind related to that, and get that group meeting and going. And you can see in there also some additional actions related to increasing the diversity across our district, exploring the idea of a grow your own program, and looking at some community involvement projects. And that these groups then, as they develop, would help lead additional professional learning across our district. As Nicole said, we expect the IDI work, the intercultural development inventory work, to expand over the next couple of years. We expect more employees to take the IDI and the associated for professional learning sessions with that. The outcome of that work, as you see on the left side, is that we expect that more people will believe that equity work is important in our district, and that we will improve teaching and learning as a part of that work. As Nicole said, each of our buildings will be expected to have a goal related to equity in their school improvement this coming year. And we expect those actions to lead to improved teaching and learning, as well as the other outcomes you see on the left side in that table. And then finally, family engagement. We see a continuation of the work that was begun this year, similar structure, stronger professional learning, and a district team that's now in place to drive this work to help us meet the outcomes that you see on the left side, including, as you would expect, a reduction in gaps for our students and increased family engagement. Nicole will then take us through our next steps.
So our next steps, so this year with our SIAC, our administrators in all the buildings helped make sure that we had a family representative, and with the whole goal of wide range of people that were represented on the SIAC, but we need to grow this some more and make sure that we have the appropriate representation moving for the future. So we have some ways that we're going to collect some feedback, work with our administrators and buildings, and try to get as many people on there to provide feedback around diversity, equity, and inclusion that we can. So responsibilities of the district planning team. So ours was the vision in preparing and facilitating SIAC, also providing support for human resources, our business office, and digital literacy to lead work within their departments. So our human resources director, Linda Nagel, is also on the team now for the planning team. And Dave is also, Nicholson, has joined us on that planning team as well, just to, again, provide them with the resources and the training to be able to lead the work within their departments. Executive directors are going to assist with leading work at their various levels, because it will be important that they check in. They have bi-weekly meetings already with principals, and just to hold them to make sure that they're reporting out on their data and we're looking at it closely. And then creating tools for monitoring impact. We're really hoping that we can start reducing these gaps in a timely fashion. The district equity team, SIAC, what their responsibilities will be, kind of talked about this, they'll be that accountability partner. They're going to monitor that impact and hopefully give us that open, honest feedback on what we can do differently and some additional action steps we need to take to close those gaps for students. Also, diverse team of staff, administrators, students, parents, and community partners. We're going to utilize some of what we have. We have a very active student group from the student superintendent advisory group that's been meeting, and they're excited and active, and they're going to join into that SIAC group as well. So excited about the insight that the students will help provide from the high school levels. And then give insight and feedback on current actions that are happening, establish some long-term goals for our system, and then identify additional actions to strengthen, again, our equity work. I'm sure they're going to have some great ideas that we can embed into just our initial starting points, because this is, again, just a place to start based on the data that we have currently in place. So with that, an opportunity for the board to ask some questions, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all of you.
I do have a question. I'm looking at the test scores and we can see that they are low right now. And the intent is to increase by 20% proficiency by 2022. But how, when I look at that with an increase, is that really going to bring our students up to where they are proficient in the work? And would it also be widening the gap too? Because I mean, it's for all students, but, and I'm just trying to get that in my head, how that would look. And I think it's great that we have this information and we know that there's work that we need to do. And when you said that they'll be putting together like equity goals, I guess my question is how, we want everyone to be successful in the district, but I still see that the gap, there will still be a gap. And is there additional work that needs to be done?
So really appreciate that question, President Humbles. Absolutely is the answer to that as well. So those school improvement goals, so whether it's students of color or whether it's IEP students or our ELL population, that's the intentionality of closing that gap. The strategic plan, yes, is for all students, but we really, like you said, if we're going to grow everybody, we aren't going to close the gaps. But with this equity work and pushing this forward, we would put more time and resources to be able to actually, in all the buildings, whatever those equity gaps are, close those gaps and be intentional about action steps. It's just not the same for every building, but as you could see, every building has them in some area. But I think we can do both at the same time, I'm hoping, when we're explicit about embedding equity within all of the goals within those school improvement plans and having that be the focus. And then being, of course, keeping those actions in front of us. So there really are wildly important goals with our lead measures that we're going to track. And if we're not seeing growth, we have to do something different quickly, not wait until the next year to do something different.
One additional, maybe this is a little appendices to that. This equity team, that vision for that and that work was prior to the pandemic and the derecho and the things that happened this year that caused the increase of those gaps. But I'll just backtrack a little bit to January 2020 when we were able to look at the Iowa School Performance Profile and we closed gaps and we had great increases in growth. That was due to the focus of the common language of those school improvement plans. So we've got some great groundwork, especially because of high reliability schools. And now this is just taking it that one step further. So I think that what you highlight is so important, President Humbles, is it's this and. It's the current work and providing very intentional supports for our children who there's still gaps within our system, unevenness between populations.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the board?
Yeah, I have a question. I just wanted to clarify. Well, first off, I thank you for doing this work. It's important, and yes, it's been a tough year. So our learning gaps it's just not quite where we want it, but we know there are reasons for that. But just to clarify, Nicole, did you say the district planning team has 9 members? Is that okay? And are those central administration people? Like who makes up that 9-member team?
Great question. So it started off as the 5 members we could have on the AASA. So it's Kent and Justin Blitz out of Culture Climate Transformation. We had LaToya, we have Eric, Adam, and Cynthia as executive directors of the various levels. And then we have Dave Nicholson that we've added a few meetings ago as CFO, and Lyndall Nagel as director of HR, and myself are currently the ones who have been meeting usually bi-weekly to try to plan, look at data, and discuss what initial actions we can take so we can start to move the needle and what voices do we need to get at the table to really help us close these gaps in the future. And we definitely need more voices, and this is just an initial start.
Okay, good. The representation on the committee that's doing the planning is very important, I believe, and clearly you recognize that. You did talk about expanding the composition of that group to include community members. And I would just encourage you to consider some of the leaders from Advocates for Social Justice. They've had a very strong pulse on the community and issues in the community, and I think they would be a great addition. There are 3 co-leaders to that group, and any of them would be a great addition to that work. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Garlock. Definitely will include them in the group. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I have a quick question. Are there opportunities for teachers who maybe have come up with innovative lesson plans or techniques that they can share that up the chain and then can be disseminated? Because I want to make sure that we have wonderful teachers and they have an opportunity to affect our children's lives. I want to make sure they have that chance to share those successes across the district and not just keep them in their classroom or even in their school.
Thank you. That was an excellent suggestion as well. We will have them on the SIAC committee, but I think you brought up a whole nother level of what's really working in their classrooms and how could they share that out and could we disseminate that throughout the system. So I'm going to write that idea down as well that we haven't thought of. So thank you so much for that.
Any other comments?
Can you speak a little bit more to the equity team from SIAC? So enjoyed the time that I had to be able to be part of SIAC. So I love just getting involved in those types of programs, but curious about the team and just the diversity of the team and just the background and how you see that complementing the team of 9 that you've got in place.
So thank you, Director Tominski. What we were thinking is instead of having another necessary group, is there a way to embed some of the work? And this year we struggled initially with what do we want SIAC to be able to contribute and really give feedback and guidance on? And we thought, family engagement, right? Something new that's not necessarily new across the system, but a new intentional plan. So when we initially started that, it was going to principals and saying, hey, we need a diverse representation of parents. And a lot of times, not just in Cedar Rapids, but everywhere, SIAC becomes very heavy with staff. And most of those staff, right, know about what's happening in the system and have opportunities to provide feedback. But how can we get that true feedback of our community? And I think also our students, which we've added another layer here. But we talked about different things. So there's a few districts around that have this equity thing on the website where they can fill out if they're interested in being on the equity committee. We also have some diverse staff in the system that have given us suggestions of, hey, I really think you need this person or this person. Our Director Garlock just said, Advocates for Social Justice. So I think it's about listening, learning, and then if people really want to be on that committee, giving them an opportunity to sign up. And I think it can be quite large. The more probably the merrier in this type of situation, because it's, again, an area that we need to continue to grow. And we have those gaps for our students, and we need to first work on decreasing those gaps, but then there's other steps. How do we keep our employees of color retained in our system? And what are those action steps? And I think there's definitely people in our system, in our community that can provide that feedback. But our next steps too can be providing who's on that SIAC and what does that look like? And you as a board of directors probably have some additional ideas that you could share back, and Superintendent Bush could give you the list and then you could provide feedback, because I'm sure there's people that we might miss. And I think it's critical that, again, we have that diverse representation of the community, of our students. I brought it up to a group of students from the Celebrating Diversity group. That's a break off of the superintendent student cabinet today. And they all wanted to be on it. And that group is extremely diverse that I was meeting with. There's 8 of them. And they were like, oh, please, I can have some great feedback on this. And they were all excited and have so many ideas for how we can start to make improvements in our system. So I think we'll have a pretty large group and we can hopefully be back in person and have those breakout sessions. And you as a board of directors can provide some additional feedback and guidance to us on how we ensure that we have the right team in place.
That's actually a great question, Director Tominski, because actually it's Iowa code that defines the makeup of the School Improvement Advisory Committee membership. And it talks about, to the extent possible, the balanced representation of race, gender, national origin, disability, students, parents, teachers, administrators, representatives of local communities. So it is by law defined, the membership for that committee.
I still think it was one of the best opportunities that I had to get involved. I mean, I'm not just saying that. It's like you learn a lot, you get to participate in the process. You had mentioned that like I think I heard there's some districts have something on the website. So if somebody's in the community, they were interested in being involved in this, what would be your recommendation? They could reach out to a director. We could put them in contact with you. What are some of the ideas that we have for people that want to get involved?
We also have application on our website, Director Tominski. You could direct people to that. It's under the Board of Education, Board Appointed Committees.
Perfect.
And for people that are interested in serving on Board Appointed Committees, there's an application form to complete.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm sorry, was someone saying something?
Yeah, it's Director
Okay.
Borcherding. I do have a comment. As a board member and as a member of a governing body, I would have a strong interest in taking the intercultural development inventory just to grow understanding and to be really intentional and thoughtful about the application and understanding of equity in our policies, to make sure that we're looking at supporting policies that are mitigating differences and not exasperating differences. So again, as a board member personally, I am one of 7. I can only speak for myself. I would have an interest and see value in taking that IDI.
That is a great idea. We'll provide, again, the opportunity and communicate that out. And I've added that to my list. So I got 4 great ideas from you guys as a board of directors. So thank you.
Well, and I want to mention too, because at one time they had the Not Without Me, and then also working with the NAACP to also draw them into the conversation. So I think that would be a great collaboration and partnership too.
I just wanted to ask real quick, a couple quick questions, maybe more on a high level discussion. When it comes to the achievement gap that we're seeing in our district, these types of gaps exist in districts across the state and the country, right? Is that true?
That is definitely accurate. Absolutely.
No, sorry. I'm assuming that no one has come up with a, tried and true solution to the problem, or else we'd just be doing that. Is that fair to say?
It's definitely fair to say we were hoping that AASA network would have some magical answers to how we can, close these student achievement gaps quickly, but everybody is working on the same things we are and not getting all the results necessarily that they want.
And the gaps, are they present early in education? Do they show up even in kindergarten when kids first come into the schools?
They do.
Okay. And so, and then the last thing is it tied to anything else? So I know we're not tracking necessarily by free and reduced lunch status anymore. I don't know if we're doing that internally, but that's not on our thing. But are these gaps tied to other things? Are they tied to family income, to family wealth? Just in general, or is there other things to be looking at when we look at these?
We have not done a cross comparison of that. I think that would be hard to measure, but we haven't really dug in to compare if there would be other aspects that would affect that.
Okay, I guess I just wanted to kind of tackle it from a high level because it seems to me that the inequality in these results probably stems from inequality outside of the schools as well. And going back to what we talked about earlier with the homeless engagement, but just across the board, if you looked at incomes from people, I think, we need to be more proactive as a board. And I think we already do a lot, and the administration, the district does a lot, but whatever we can do to make people's lives better across the city, no matter who they are, That's what kind of work I think we should be engaged in, because I think that's the kind of work that's going to help make people's lives better and hopefully help get better education outcomes, for the kids. The work everyone's doing here that you've outlined tonight, I think is great. But I just think from a board perspective, it would be helpful if we sometimes took a bigger picture look at these things, because this isn't a Cedar Rapids, created. It's not like we've done something to create these gaps in achievement. This is a persistent problem, state and nationwide. And so that high level view is what I want to do going forward when we're talking about this.
To add to Director Merschbach's comments, I would add to that as elected representatives on the board of directors for the school district, I believe personally it's also our responsibility to be good community advocates for equity in our networks outside of our roles as on school board, to advocate for equity. It's a community effort, and the school district is one piece of that community.
I agree. Are there any other comments at all? Well, I thank you for the presentation, and we know that there's work that we need to do as a district, and that you guys are looking at that, and we can't solve it like in a day, but it is a priority for our district. So I appreciate the work, and look forward to an update too as you guys work through the process. And like Director Garlock had said, we bring in the community, we hear all voices, and that helps us too in the work that needs to be done. I can appreciate that we have the piece in the family engagement, because engaging the families will be so very important, because hearing their voices and their needs will be help and will provide some guidance for us too. So thank you. Next, we will move to board governance. And I have the final agenda items tonight includes a recommendation from Superintendent Bush regarding the boundary study, which was presented as an information item in our March 8th board meeting. Are there any questions or comments from board members?
I do have just the review of what we presented last month, so if helpful for the board. Just as a reminder, these are the current boundaries that we highlighted and the schools that were in question. We did also pull out the park area there at Morgan Creek as an adjustment from the community as to what we might consider for those boundaries as we looked at Maple Grove and West Willow future boundaries, certainly considering Truman, Van Buren, and Hoover boundaries. And so this was the final recommendation, just as a reminder, and that the future West Willow would be here in the blue. All of the little blue boxes would be then part of the West Willow boundary. And then the Maple Grove would be all of this orange outlined boundary. And the only thing in question is our current Truman permits. We will have to work with these families about whether they intend to go back to their resident neighborhood school, or they would be presented with an opportunity perhaps of these two future sites. And some of those families actually are already current, the current Coolidge and the current Jackson families. And so they might be looking at going back to their resident school. So this 109 folks is the only thing in question as to where their destination might be. And that this would help out Hoover as well as Van Buren getting a little wiggle room due to their growth, each by about one section, what's between 25 and 40 students, I think a little bit more than about 40 students at the Van Buren location. So that was the final recommendation. If the board is prepared to move on this, we would then be working with the city on developing some new color-coded maps for communications. Course communication to families with follow-up, but these would be the final recommendations. We've had a lot of input from our families along the way. We would have to create a transportation plan. And then, of course, probably very acute communication plans for each one of those resident schools. Just as an overall reminder, this boundary recommendation would be for the 22-23 school year. Next year, West Willow opens. It will not be completely full until the following year when Maple Grove opens, and then we would implement these new boundaries at that time. So any feedback and questions is certainly welcome.
So are there any additional comments from board members? Okay. So if not, all those in favor of approval, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. Before we conclude tonight's meeting, we have two final items. First is a motion for a closed session to discuss the evaluation of the professional competency of an individual whose performance is being considered. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Do we have any discussion? This is a roll call.
Can you tell me who seconded that? I'm sorry, I couldn't tell.
Director Borcherding.
Thank you very much. Roll call, Director Garlock,
Aye.
Director Newman,
Aye.
Director Tominski,
Aye.
Director Merschbrock,
Aye.
Director Riesinger,
Aye.
Director Borcherding,
Aye.
President Humbles.
Aye. Next, we will have a moment of silence we have an individual we'd like to honor with a moment of silence and recognition of her service to our district. I will turn this over to Scott Wing, who is the manager of transportation.
Thank you, Director Humbles. It is with a heavy heart to inform you that Barb Quigley has passed away. Barb was a bus driver for Cedar Rapids Schools for 18 years, from 1990 to 1997, and then again from 2010 to 2021. Most recently, she drove a route for Jefferson, the Transition Center, and Grant School. Barb was an absolute joy to work with and had a heart of gold. She was fiercely protective of her students, always looking out for them and making sure they get home safely. She was also very friendly with her coworkers. Her bus attendant shared this memory. One day, Barb was wearing a neat hoodie, and I said I liked it. And the next thing I know, Barb had given me 7 hoodies. Barb is survived by her life partner of 35 years, who is also a bus driver for us, Mac Della McMillan, and also her sister. As we observe this moment of silence in memory of Barb Quigley, let us remember the lives of the students and the staff that she has positively impacted as employees of our school district.
We'll have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. On behalf of the entire board, we'd like to extend our condolences to Barbara's family, and we will continue to keep them in our hearts and our prayers. With no further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Board members, if you'll please stay.